name's Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Wednesday, May 4th, 2016. Also joining me is Anna McDougal. And today we're in Cotton County, Oklahoma, interviewing David Gammill for the Cowboys in Every County Oral History Project. David, so nice to have you today.
Good to have you here.
David, let's learn a little bit more about you. Could you tell me the year you were born and where you were born?
1953, I was born in Wichita Falls, Texas. My parents lived just a half mile east of our location right here, and I grew up there in that location. Their doctor was in Wichita Falls.
Okay, and tell me a little bit about your parents.
Okay, they are lifelong residents of Cotton County. My dad and his family farmed. My mother's dad had an electric company in Duval, and that when they got married, they full-time farmed as their only source of income. Raised three of us kids. I have an older sister and a younger brother. We were all born in the same hospital in Wichita Falls. We went to a small country school called a Piatone. I went through the 4th grade before the school disbanded, and my brother was in the 1st grade. And because of the school disbanding, all the kids, there were 40 kids in that school, we were allowed to pick where we wanted to go to further schooling. So we picked Walters, and we were the furthest students that attended Walters. We were 19 miles.
Wow.
And on the end of the bus route, and our kids ended up going to Walters too. Same situation for them. We were the first ones on the bus and the last ones off. So we paid dearly for the privilege of being able to go to Walters, but it was the best school in the area at the time.
Well, going back to your time at the country school, how would you get there?
They had a bus route. They had 2 buses. In fact, my dad drove one of those buses. It was one of those deals where the local farmers were a lot of times trying to pick up some extra pay, doing some extra little jobs around, and that was one of the things he did.
Yeah. Well, thinking about your time during those early years, what would you take for lunch to school?
We ate at the lunchroom, and I was there for 4 years, and we had 2 different cooks during that time. The first 2 years were great. We had a very ingenious cook, and she had a lot of different things, and she was a good cook. The last 2 years, we had red beans 4 times a week, and it wasn't so good. But it was kind of interesting because the school, went through the 8th grade. There were 4 grades in one room and 4 grades in another room. At lunchtime, we all had to go down this one little hall, and it had a place you had to wash your hands before you could go eat, and then go in and sit on benches in the lunchroom. Had outdoor toilets. When we first started the last year, they did eventually get indoor toilets. And it was a husband and wife teachers. One taught the upper grades, one taught the lower grades. It was an interesting time. It was actually a hard learning experience at the last because the school was disbanded because of problems within the school. The last teachers fostered a lot of discontent amongst the community, and it broke the community up too. They disbanded it, and we went our ways. My grandmother lived at Walters, and I had cousins that went to Walters, and so we wanted to go there too.
Well, is the school building still standing?
Yes, it is. We go to church there still. It is they consider it a community building. We don't own it, but they let us keep having services there for keeping it up. We're the only ones that used it. And it had an old gymnasium, and it fell into disrepair over the years because we couldn't maintain it. We didn't have control of it anyway, but anyway, it's fallen. The roof has fallen in, but it was built by the WPA back in the day. It was a poured concrete gymnasium, and shell is there, just still in fantastic shape.
Well, was it a easy transition to go to Walters for you?
Oh, it was a big change because it was a big school, compared to where we had been. We had 40 kids in our whole school of Pittone, and there were 75 kids in my grade in Walters, which we had a bigger. My grade was bigger than most over there. And then just dealing with town and so many kids, and we were not used to going to town like that at that time. Mm-hmm. That was 64 when we started going to Walters. It was, over time, it was the best thing that would happen. But you've got to also give credit to the little country schools, because of the kids that went to Pittone. Almost invariably, it would be a Pittone kid that was either valedictorian or salutatorian at Walters. So there was a lot of talent in this community.
Being raised on a farm, I'm sure there were a fair amount of farm chores you had to do. With your commute to Walters, how did you work in your morning chores, or did you have morning chores?
Oh, we really didn't. We had chickens, but we did. The only thing we had a milk cow for in my youth was when we had show calves, and we had nurse cows for a show calf, but they had given up on the milking by the time I got up big enough to do that. And as we got older, then we all three of us kids had show calves, and we were absolutely our job to take care of them, morning and evening. And it was easy enough thing. Get up early enough to do it.
4-H or FFA?
Yeah, both.
Both.
My sister was in 4-H through the whole time, because back then they didn't have girls in FFA. Mm-hmm. And then me and my brother were both in FFA. I was president of Walters FFAs I went through.
Well, while you're going to school at Walters, are you drawn to any subjects in particular?
Well, I was drawn to science and math. I ended up being the salutatorian for my class. After I graduated, they changed the rating system, and I would have been valedictorian, but there was a girl that did not take chemistry and trigonometry and engineering and everything else, and she was valedictorian. And I just had a 3.99 average, and so I wasn't it. But back in the day, there weren't scholarships, free rides that went with it anyway. But it was just a matter of pride.
Were your parents very encouraging with education?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Neither one of them went to college, but my dad, he was always studying farming operations, and then when things got hard on the farm, he actually got a correspondence electronics course, and he became a TV repairman on the side. And I don't think it ever amounted to much money, but it showed you his potential that he could learn to do that with a book or a set of books. But they were always pushing us kids to be the best we could be.
Well, kind of take me through your first exposure to OSU. How did you start thinking about going to college at OSU?
Well, it was my intent when I became a senior in high school, I was going to go to vet school.
Okay.
And of course that was the only place. And so we went they had an OSU vet college day for seniors, and I went up for that. And it was one of those life-changing moments, you might say. When I was 14 years old, I ran a combine, here on the farm. And I got my hand in the combine, and it pinched the end of my finger off and split between here and ran a bolt through the back of my hand. And that healed up okay, but it left me that I'm sensitive to cut flesh. And when I went, and it never dawned on me that there would be a correlation, but I went to vet day up there, and they were working on a horse, and they had cut into its shoulder, and I turned white as a sheet and nearly passed out. I mean, my legs wouldn't hold me up. And so we decided that probably wouldn't be my course of action. But I decided, well, that was the place to go to get the best education. And so I decided I was going to go to OSU anyway, just pursue something else, and which I did. I went into animal science and ag econ when I got there. But that was what initially, I guess it was the other things too, because when you're in FFA, you go to OSU regularly, through high school anyway, to different contests and conventions and stuff like that. So I was familiar with the campus somewhat, and it's still built on that notion that was the best school in the state.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you're graduating high school, what year did you graduate high school?
71.
Okay. When you graduated in 71, how did you get to Stillwater? It's your freshman year, you're moving in. How did you get to Stillwater?
Well, there was some function that we had at Walters, for seniors, and there was a person there from a fraternity, and he said, "You ought to come live in our dorm," and yeah, it was kind of silly, but I really had no clue what a fraternity was and really what he was talking about. But he was ag based, and he said that their house was ag based, and that they'd like for me to go there. And so I thought, that's what I'll do. So that's how I ended up at AGR House. And, one car with a suitcase and a box or two of belongings, and drove myself up there. And it was so simple back then, when I'd move home, for the summer, well, I could get it all. It wasn't no problem at all to move it in a car. And my kids, move them to college, and my gosh, it takes a moving van. But anyway, that's how I got there. I was invited to, join AGR, and which I did, and lived there. And of course, that was going really from small town, moving away from home, and moving into fraternity was a totally different world.
Well, what were you driving? What kind of car did you have?
65 GTO, hot rod, 3 deuces. If you know what that is, that's a hot rod motor.
And how'd you get that car? How'd you come across it?
Oh, we bought it at a used car lot in Lawton, and I worked summers and got paid. That's the way we handled things as I was a kid. We kids worked on the farm for my dad, and we got paid hourly wages. We kept it written down on a card or on a calendar every day that we worked, and then he'd pay us at the end of the summer what we'd earned, and I paid for the car, and by that time we had we were allowed to keep our show cattle, and so I was having a few calves to sell by then too. Anyway, it was back in the day, when a car probably got 12 miles a gallon, but it didn't cost, but 25 cents a gallon to buy fuel. Mm-hmm. So it was easy. And I will say, the one big support that I got from my parents going to college is that they did pay for all my gas and insurance on the car. I had scholarships and then I worked through college, but I had scholarships. Some paid a lot of my way.
So you drive to campus, you move into the AGR house. Mm-hmm. Describe the house for me back then.
Okay, most everybody lived in a great big square dorm at the back of the house, with bunk beds, just rows and rows of bunk beds. There were, some other rooms, and as time went on, I was able to move into one of the rooms when I got a big brother. He had a room. Everything was, I guess you'd say pretty controlled. There was strict rules about, no women in the house, no alcohol in the house, and you're in by this time on certain days, and, you got to keep your grades up and act like a gentleman and such stuff as that. Some things were policed better than others.
Do you remember your house mom?
His mom, B. Trying to think what her name really was.
That's what I hear a lot of people call her. I was just making sure it was the same one while you were still there. What did you think of Mom B?
Oh, she was good for teaching manners. That's about it. Didn't have a whole lot more function than that. I guess she tended to keep things a little more calm, at the functions that she was at. But, it was interesting, all that.
Well, how did you decide on your major? You switched, of course, from vet med.
Mm-hmm. Oh, in the back of my mind, I always hoped that there'd be a way to come back to the farm, even though it certainly was not guaranteed. My dad's operation was certainly not big enough to support two families, but I had the interest in that, and yet I also had dreams that I'd get an education with my background, that I could find a job, with back then farmland or some big ag company that would pay me for what I could do. And I guess it's just one of those things that God leads you in different ways and opens doors and closes doors. And when I got out of college or was finishing up, I was the third highest in my class in the College of Animal Science, and I went to every interview that could be gone to, and I was offered a traveling seed salesman in Nebraska or a 4-H agent in Duncan, Oklahoma, and neither suited me, and they didn't pay deadly, and I wasn't, it was going to require me to be away from home. The traveling seed thing was, or feed was 4 nights a week away from home. And anyway, in the last 2 years at OOHRP, I was working for the Animal Science Department in research, and they offered me the management of a new animal research building there when I graduated. So rather than go off to some great big job, I stayed there working for OSU. And it paid okay, but it wasn't nothing to, that I'd want to do for the rest of my life.
Well, but before we get to a lot more after graduation, are there any professors or classes that really stick out in your mind from your time on campus?
Oh, definitely. Dr. Goodwin, the ag economist, and he was also sponsor for the AGRs, but he was an amazing person. Anybody that ever had his class, whether they, he mainly taught one class, the beginning econ class, but of course we had, contact with him throughout the time because of AGR ties. But anybody that ever went there and had his class remembers him because he knew everybody's name. You go, and it was every kid was in the College of Agriculture went through his class, but he knew everybody's name and ask you where you're from, and he'd remember that too. And he had a different way of testing. His test, I think you were allowed, 3 hours for semester test, 3 or 4 hours? Well, you would spend, every single person would spend 3 hours because he said he wanted you to have, if you knew anything, he wanted you to have a place to write it down. And so, and then he graded on the curve. But it was a grueling thing to get through his test. And then the other one was the Dr. Wedeman, Robert Wedeman, and the College of Animal Science. he worked for him, and he was a wonderful, kind man, very intelligent, and there were a number of people. I was trying to think, there's the guy that had slaughter class. He was a Cajun. Can't remember his name offhand, but anyway, he was really a good teacher. It's kind of an odd subject that might inspire a person, but anyway, I did like it too.
Well, you mentioned you worked while you were in school.
Right.
Before you ended up working with research, did you have other jobs on campus?
Right. I believe I started out because in high school, I worked after high school at an auto parts store in Walters. And so I went up there, and I didn't work the first semester because we were pledging, took up a goblet time. But then the second semester, I got on at Simpson Pontiac in the parts department. And I worked with a couple of guys there, and then the next semester, Simpson Pontiac moved to a bigger building downtown, and they didn't use me in the parts department that year, but I just did like janitorial work for them, cleaning up and all. And then I worked for food service. I think the guy's name was A.J. Little, the boss man out there, the old crusty Army guy, it would seem, that was head of the food service department. And there were a number of us AGRs that worked out there for him. And we cut meat, and we packed meat, and we delivered stuff to the dorms and to the fraternities, and learned to dip stuff with that bunch. Mm-hmm. And similar valuable things. Anyway, I did get a better job. It had its perks. Every now and then you could get on the bakery run. You had something you volunteered for. But anyway, got on the real early morning. It was like 5 in the morning that you had to do it. But, you got some things that fell on the floor. You get a donut or a roll. Supposedly fell on the floor, and you had plenty to eat.
Well, what would you do for fun?
Well, I wasn't a real fun guy, I guess. I came home twice a month, or every other week, because I was dating Debbie, my current wife, high school sweetheart. She was 2 years behind me, and I came home every other week. And of course, my dad was paying the gas, so I worked all day Saturday, doing farm work for him, and then we went out, Saturday night, and then went back to school on Sunday afternoon. And, me and I had a few guys that might go out a little bit during the week, but not very much. And of course, fraternity, back at that time, they had stuff scheduled that, they were promoting activity between, the fraternities and sororities, and I had to protest that I didn't want to go to the dance deal with the other girl because I had a girlfriend, and they were pretty good. They let me off of that, and I didn't go. But I was pretty studious, and I studied a lot.
Didn't spend any time at the strip, or? Not
very much. Back then, I did more after I got married than what I did before. But things got interrupted some too, in that I went the first year and became a member of AGR, and then that summer, my dad had my brother at home helping with farming, and I got a job working in Walters for the rural electric. And halfway through the summer, my dad had a heart attack. And so I laid out the fall semester and planted the wheat crop. And so I didn't go. And during that time, also got engaged. And so when I went back to school, I did not move back into the fraternity. I was still a member and, attended the business meetings and stuff, but, I had plans to get married, so I bought a trailer house and started making payments on that, so that, when we did get married, we'd have that place to live.
Where'd you park it?
B&H Trailer Park south of town. You went down, I forgot the name of the road. First road goes south, out into the country, just as you come in from the west, and you go like mile and a half south, and then turn back east, and it was laid out there in that flat creek bottom. And I had a roommate from Walters that lived with me to help pay the way back then.
Okay. Well, thinking about what's going on in campus and politically, what was the climate like on campus?
Oh, the thing that stuck out the most back in that day is the time of hippies and waterbeds and streaking. That's when, it's while I was there. In fact, it was after I got married. It was the next year, 74, that streaking incident happened there on campus, or on the strip. And it was also the time the Vietnam War was going on. I guess kind of a significant thing. My first semester at school was when they had the lottery for the draft, and I ended up, and all us guys, in the fraternity, were sitting around listening to see what number they got, and I actually got a low number. I was 54, and so I was called up for physical and stuff, and I have mild asthma, and I took asthma treatments as a kid, and because of that, I was rated 4F, so I didn't end up having to go. And it was a time when that lottery part went in, you did not get relieved from duty just because you were going to college. So, and I don't guess there was anybody out of my pledge class that ended up having to go. There was certainly that was during the time while we were there that the tumbleweed was built, and the jail on Strip was built at that time. So those were the big, dance hall drinking spots.
Would you take part in the streaking? I have to ask.
No, I didn't. In fact, I didn't even get to see it. We had been down on the Strip, but we weren't there at that time.
You never know. So you mentioned also waterbed, so that was the big thing?
It was, and we got one when we first got married, and it was one of those deals that, I didn't know what I was doing. And I lived in a trailer house, and you put a big, something that heavy in there, well, I was a country boy, and I figured, well, we better block all that up and take care of that, which we did. But it was a challenge because they were just new at that time, and people weren't aware of what all it would do, and it was fine during the summertime, but you lay on it in the wintertime and the water just sucks the heat away from you. And they didn't have heaters, or I couldn't afford one when we first got it, and so that was a challenge, and we eventually got rid of it because we just could not stay warm.
Well, you mentioned, kind of what happened with looking for a job as you're inching closer to graduation.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember much from graduation? Did you have your family come up?
Oh yeah. Everybody came, and it's kind of hard on my brother because he ended up going to junior college over at Wilburton, and his graduation was the same day mine was, and my folks ended up coming to mine and then running off, as soon as mine was over, and then going down there to be with him after his was over. But everybody came to it, both sides of the family. Everybody took pictures, and it was a neat thing. My sister did go to college, but she hadn't graduated by the time I did, and so I was the first one to graduate from college.
And was it at Lewisfield?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Did you attend many sporting events while you were in school?
Oh, not a whole lot. Sports never has been a real big thing for me.
Okay. So you graduated, you took the job with OSU. How long did you stay in that position?
Less than a year. Again, my dad's health never had gotten very good, and he ended up getting sick. And it wasn't his heart that time, but it was they thought it was Legionnaire's disease. Anyway, it was like a deep infection internally, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. And he was in the hospital like for 3 months, and he never did come back to be able to work full time after that. And they called me up and offered me, to come into partnership with them. And so that's what we did. And it's been, when you take that on, a lot of people don't give it a whole lot of thought, but it is a lifelong commitment when you come back into a business with an elderly couple to see them through. And my mom's still alive. She's 90.
Wow.
But she's still able to live on the farm out here because my brother and I both live here close by and help her out. And she's pretty spunky.
Well, when you came back to the family business, how many acres at that time did your father have?
He had about 900 acres of cropland and probably 400 of pasture. He had, I think, 70 cows. And I knew coming back, of course I had a college degree and I was gung-ho and needed to expand and in order to try to support 2 families. And you don't acquire new land real easy, but we began getting more land, and immediately we started running starter cattle, and that was our biggest money source, is running starter cattle. We, not the first year, but we built it up, and we ran 1,000 head of starter calves, for years and years, and split grazing out all the calves that we could run during the winter. We'd graze out enough wheat acres and then harvest the rest of it after that.
Would you hire any outside help, or would it just all be within the family?
Oh, in the early years, my brother was around off and on, and like he would usually come and help at harvest, and I would do most all the plowing, but I needed some help at wheat sowing, and we had generally hire somebody. Just that's a hard thing when you just need help part of the year and can't get a full-time person, because they need full-time work too. So it's hard to find somebody that's worth anything that doesn't have a full-time job already. And we went, we had run onto some good Mexican guys that would help, and they were good, and it kind of fit their program because they'd go back to Mexico for a big part of the year anyway. And sometimes we couldn't find that, and I'd use some guys from the employment office at Lawton, and without exception, that was always a wreck. They'd tear up more than they could do any good for. And that's when I finally got my best hand. Debbie, she said, I think I can run that. And I'll be here every day. So I told her to run the tractor, and she was top notch and tough, and she got it done. Even to the point that she could take a tire off underneath the plow, a flat. And is in later years when the boys got up big enough, and the girl, my daughter, it was always required, once they were big enough to assume some responsibilities, they had to have pitch in some way or another. You know, for my daughter, she was the oldest, you know, so she hit it first, and given the choice, said, well, you know, you can cook meals for the rest of us that are working in the field and bring that, or you can run tractor. And she said, well, she wasn't going to do nothing about that cooking. so and she was always a white knuckle tractor driver. it bothered her. She really didn't like it either. And she finally went back and decided she'd rather cook. But anyway, as the boys and kids got up big enough, well then, you know, Debbie she wouldn't be in the summer field work, but you know, when the kids go back to school, then she helped me wheat sowing all the time, running the tractor.
Well, did you also have to have a job outside of the farm as well? No,
I say that, but you know, there were things that I did. We tried going on harvest before our harvest and after our harvest, and we went. One year we got rained in our harvest and we couldn't leave to go, and so we went on a milo harvest and then we went on a wheat harvest, and we didn't end up making enough for what we were spending, so we quit doing that. And I bought a truck that we used for wheat harvest, and I hauled for local farmers, hauled wheat during the winter from time to time. It's probably one of the jobs I hated the most. And finally, price wheat went down, the trucking pay went down, and I decided it wasn't worth my time to do that either. And then in '96, well, I got the idea to sell crop insurance on the side, and that's what has made us the most money. And I continued to farm big, even though I did a lot of crop insurance until 2006, and at that time I was offered a insurance agency in Granville to buy. The man was retiring, and I did that, and I cut my farming down by a third, and I still continue to farm quite a lot. But I did that in the insurance, and it pays all the time. Farming pays sometimes.
Well, I'm guessing you were a consumer of crop insurance before you started selling crop insurance, so you were pretty familiar.
Right.
So when you decided to make the move, was it easy or was it challenging?
It was traumatic. To give up the freedom out here on the farm to do every day what you needed to do, to being obligated. Once you got in the insurance office, well, my personal priorities had to take a back seat because I was responsible for somebody else's crops, and so I had to do that first, and then do the farming on mornings and night and weekends. And giving up that, being able to do what you're supposed to do out here on a farm and do it the very best that you could do, that was hard. And then sitting in an office all day was hard. And it was the way the guy that had it before, you know, kind of to illustrate, he had his desk and office kind of in a little back hole in the building, and he couldn't see out. And that was a killer for me. And so within, like 6 months, I said, we've got to change something here. And so Debbie and I did the carpentry work, and we remodeled that office so I could have a window and be able to see out. But it's something that it was hard to make that change over, but it was an opportunity still, and worth the cost. But it's still, I don't know, I guess it's not true for everybody, but for me certainly, I'll always be a farmer at heart.
Mm-hmm. Is it more challenging these days to make a living farming?
It is as of the last few years. This year's going to be the worst in 20 years probably. Mm. But we had a period of time there where wheat prices were high, $7, $8, and we had drought years in there too. But the crop insurance was guaranteeing the wheat crop at the higher price, and so even though the drought cut our crops tremendously, we still were able to get by pretty well because the crop insurance guarantees were good. And the last 2 years the drought went away and we've had such excess rain, our crops have been poor here, but the prices have went down this year. The prices are really down. Mm. And again, we've had enough rain that it's damaged our crops, and so the crops aren't going to be that good down in this part of the state anyway. Hmm. So it's going to be a really tough year. And additionally, I don't personally own any cattle. My son does, and all my customers run cattle and stocker calves, and that market was sky high and it's went way down, and so that's a big challenge for them, for the stocker calf guys, because they bought them, had to pay high price for them in the fall, and now the prices went down. Mm-hmm. Cotton prices are down. And it's really tough. Going to be a tough year.
Hmm. Well, you've been very busy within the industry, especially in Cotton County. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I've always felt a responsibility to promote agriculture in all its different forms, and there's a lot of guys that want somebody else to do it. Want somebody else. I'd be at a meeting and they'd elbow me and say, "Get up and talk about that." And over time, I was the person. I was on the original board of the Cotton County Cattlemen's Association when it was formed, and then I was asked to sit on the Older's Elevator Board, and I was on it for 20 years, and those are all kind of local issues and mattered because we took our wheat there and bought our fertilizer there. And then Farm Bureau is the biggest voice for agriculture in the state, and I pursued a position on the county board, and didn't get on the first time I went, but the second time I did, and I've been on the Farm Bureau board just as long, and go state conventions and such. And then I was in the very first class of the Ag Leadership Program, and after, it's one of those deals that you go on an international tour and you get a lot of training as far as being an ag spokesman. They train you to answer questions to TV reporters and write articles for papers and stuff like that. And so when you finish ag leadership, and I think that was 82 or 3, well, you're all revved up and you really want to be a spokesman. And so I went to the Wheat Growers Association meeting that year and got on the Wheat Grower Board and have been on it ever since. And then, I think 4 or 5 years ago, I got on the Wheat Commission for the state. I'm one of 5 men that represent wheat on the Wheat Commission. And there's every wheat farmer in the state has 2 cents taken out of each bushel and collected for promotion. And the Wheat Commission spends that money to promote wheat and research. And a good chunk of it goes back to OSU. Part of it is dictated to go to OSU, and then we fund extra projects at OSU for research. And then we promote international sales of wheat. And I've always felt that you know, you need to try to help yourself, and you know that I felt that I needed to do it, and somebody's got to do it, and some people that attempt to do it don't know what they're talking about, and so I enjoy being there to try to keep the story straight.
Well, you have deep roots in Cotton County.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how the county and even Walters as well has changed through the years?
Yeah, such a tremendous move out of the country. It takes so much less people to do the work, to work the land. You know, our machines, farm machines have gotten bigger. And I don't know which drew the other. You know, farming never paid as great, and so you had, as the cities had higher paying jobs, you know, so many of the kids went away to a better life with higher paying jobs. And so that really left less people here working the land, and so they needed bigger equipment to do that, and so that it made it possible. And you know, the elderly, as they have passed away, our neighbors and all out here, you know, for the most part, nobody moved into those houses. They just sat vacant and they've fallen down now. A few of the really nice houses, I guess, are still occupied by somebody that has a job in town. They just want to live in the country in a house. You know, they don't have the acreage around it. And I think about it as a kid. You know, there was almost a house on every quarter of land here, and you know, now my family's got several houses right here, but you go this way and they're all gone, and that way they're all gone, and so few people out here. You know, all those older landlords that we had when I came back to the farm are all gone. In fact, some of their kids that got the land when they died, they've died now too. And it really is becoming a lot more disconnected. Those that have control of the land are far enough removed that they never lived on it, and a lot of them don't remember their grandparent that owned it, and they don't have an appreciation for how hard it is for us out here to make a living on it. They just see it as, well, that land's worth a lot of money, you ought to be paying quite a bit for it. And that's true in a way, but I can only pay what it'll produce, not what it's worth selling. Mm-hmm. And it's been, you know, I hate to see all the infrastructure out here run down like it has. Cotton County's challenged because we don't have a big town within the county, you know, as a tax base or sales tax, and so our county commissioners really have a difficult time, you know, keeping the roads up, schools, keeping the schools up, and keeping our schools. The attendance is falling down in the smaller towns. Walters is still pretty good shape because a lot of people live in Walters that work in Lawton, but Ranelagh and Temple are far enough removed. They're really having a challenging time paying expenses and keeping their schools.
Do you find, you know, as you're working in this area, many OSU grads in this part of Oklahoma? Oh,
there really is. You know, that's one thing. Agriculture. You know, Cameron's got a good ag department too, but the guys that really wanted to get a good ag degree went to OSU, and you know, a lot of them came back here. And OSU, you know, cultivates that notion too because of their outreach, both in teaching and research and the extension people and all. And so we see a lot of OSU people, you know, professors in extension, you know, all the time down here. So that helps everybody realize, you know, the importance that OSU has out in the country.
How do you keep up with news about what's going on at OSU's these days?
I get a lot of emails and newsletters in different parts up there. Mm-hmm. And the Wheat Commission, particularly, you know, we have meetings up there every now and then too, and every meeting we have, we'll have OSU people there updating us too. Of course, that's primarily the ag direction, ag issues that are brought to us.
Well, you know, pulling up to your house, I could always tell I'm in friendly territory by, you know, seeing the friendly side of Pistol Pete out front. How do you show your OSU pride?
Oh, we've got OSU tags on both vehicles. Numerous things around the farm, and you know, I usually have a big OSU symbol up on the end of my shop down there, but it got damaged in a storm, so I haven't got it back up yet.
When you look back at your time on campus, how did attending OSU impact your life?
I don't know, it really, I guess, you know, broadens your scope, and you see, you know, kids from all over the country with all different backgrounds, and you know, pulling something out of the school that they can have a better life, make a better life with. And OSU is such a nurturing place, you know, friendly people, and you know, it was just, or my experience, you know, with the people in the ag department, and couldn't have been better. You know, they were so kind and helpful and promote you in every way.
Sure, yeah. Along the same line, OSU's graduation is this weekend, and if you had the chance to talk to any of the graduates, is there any advice you would give them, what to take away from their time at OSU and what to look forward to, things like that?
Well, you'd think that you'd hope that you could say, well, just, you know, there's something great, just go and open the door and it'll be there. But I'd say have faith that you keep plugging along and you can use what you've gotten here and it will take you someplace.
Tell me a little bit about your family.
Okay, my personal family, wife, high school sweetheart, been married 42 years. I've got 3 kids. The oldest girl, she's in Moore, Oklahoma. Got 1 son. She works as an auto financer. She finances car lots, not car dealers. And I got the middle boy is a welder in Medill, pipe fitter, and then the youngest son lives just over here a quarter mile. He runs cows on my grass, and then he does help me in the insurance agency. And he crawls on rocks. He's got one of these great big vehicles with the great big tires, and they crawl up the mountains on them.
Well, it's probably good to have family close by, and also
sure.
Interested in helping with the land as well.
Right. Now, my brother lives just over here half a mile, and he never has been a farmer. He's had 1 farm, and we did most of the work for him over the years. And he usually had a job in town. His wife was a teacher.
Well, we find that alums we talk to have strong loyalty to OSU. What do you think sparks such loyalty? Well,
you know, one thing is seeing the value of the school and the quality of people and services provided there, and the helpfulness. You know, that's always like an outreach of people there, and so many people have gone there. You know, from our area, whether they come back to this or not. You know, so many of the kids, you know, went and attended school there from Walters. And I don't see that'll ever change. You know, it's such a good campus, and you know, it's just a matter of quality and, you know, openness, and I think it can't beat it. I will say that my sister did go to OU, and I have attended some, you know, training and some things at OU, and it's just a whole different vibe. It's not like home like OSU is. And the people that go there, they're loyal to their football team, but you know, it's not the same. The campus is just not the same.
Well, what have we missed? What have anything else you'd like to add before we close out today?
Not that I can think of.
All right, David, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk with us a little bit about your time at OSU and your career as well.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity.